Whoa! It's the illusion reporting from somewhere on spaceship Earth. I'm in the garage. We're doing a book review. For those of you who don't know, there's a playlist down below that has all sorts of book reviews I've done over the years. But I haven't done a book review in a number of years because I actually haven't finished a book in quite a while. And I have finally finished a book. Stephen Ambrose's Nothing Like It in the World. Stephen Ambrose, Nothing Like It in the World, coming in at 357 pages, something like that. 367 pages. Just this book is about the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. A must read, I think. I don't think we as a modern society understand, especially as a modern American society, understand the impact of the Transcontinental Railroad. I'm reading this book, I grasp that we do not understand what this meant for us, both positively and negatively, as people inhabiting this continent and people moving through time and space. I mean, literally, like, the railroad was essentially like a time travel machine, if you understand travel at the time. It brought the East Coast and the West Coast together. It tied America together through uncharted lands. What they did was unprecedented at the time. And it had a national audience. The entire country was behind it. And I think, so first, before I get into about that, on just the level of the book, it's a little dry. This book's a little dry. It's not terribly dry. It's action-packed enough to keep the pages turning, but it gets a lot into finances and politics, which were super important to the construction of the railroad. But what I found more interesting was about the actual construction of the railroad and the conquering of these undeveloped lands, going east from Stockton, California, and west from Omaha, Nebraska. Because, again, there were two railroads competing. It was a giant competition. So on just the book level, it's got a bunch of photographs. It's got a whole photo gallery in it, which is awesome. It's got pictures of all the players. It's got pictures of the railroad being constructed. The photos are fantastic. And you know the thing I always complain about, it's got plenty of maps. It's got lots and lots of maps in the book. They're not very well detailed, but they're detailed enough to get you there. And they're dispersed throughout the book nicely when appropriate. But I still did find myself going on to Google and kind of looking into some of this stuff a little bit more in depth, because, you know, I'm one of those kind of guys. So overall, I would say it's on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a super easy, just like, yeah, I can't put the book down, read, and 1 just being slogging through just minutia. I would give this a 7. It's a 7. It's a good read. It's a little slow at parts. You got to kind of power yourself through it, but I think all said and done, it enlightens you to a bunch of important stuff. And what's really interesting, I think, is in the beginning is how much where the railroad was going to be, whether it was going to be north or south. Like, you have to understand that when the railroad was being discussed, it was prior to the Civil War. They didn't know which way it was going to go. and whether it was going to have a northerly route or a southerly route. And so one of the reasons the railroad didn't get built till after the Civil War was because the way the government worked prior to the Civil War, each faction wanted the route to either be south or north for their own economic reasons. And so it got stalled a lot. And when we get to the Civil War, what I didn't know until I read this book was that Lincoln was a huge railroad proponent. He was way into the road. He was way into the Transcontinental Railroad, was a huge advocate for it, and was all about it. So when he becomes president, he's all about the railroad. Civil War happens. But during the Civil War, one of the main things that's going on is this jockeying for the railroad and organizing the finances, because the railroad guys who see it as the answer to the future, like, you have to understand, this was the equivalent of going to Jupiter, man. Like at that time, like the California and the gold deposits were out west, but in order to get to California, you either had to take a boat all the way around Cape Horn, the southern tip of South America, or take a boat to the isthmus there in Panama, go overland and get on another boat and go up to California, or you had to travel by wagon or horseback across hostile territory that was inhabited by the locals, who were none too happy about the the expanding white population. So to get from the East Coast, which was heavily developed, out to the West Coast to California was like going to Jupiter. And so when this happened, it was a big deal, and it had the entire nation behind it. So understand that the railroad, when they start building the railroad, it's right after the Civil War. Like, it all gets greenlit during the Civil War, but after the Civil War, they got the resources, the money, and it's this big thing that they do to sort of heal the nation. And again, I don't think that we talk a lot about Reconstruction after the Civil War, but I don't think we really talk about what brought the country back together and sort of healed a lot of it was the Transcontinental Railroad, because all the dudes who were working on it were soldiers from the Civil War, both Confederate and Union soldiers. And you have to understand that the infrastructure of the Army, i.e. the mentality of waging war, was put into building the railroad. The order and the organization and the military precision was put into building the railroad. And that was the railroad that was going from Omaha west. And then you had a whole different scene going on with the railroad being built from Sacramento going east, which was going through the Sierra Mountains, which was like some huge, they said it couldn't be done type of thing. And that's one of the more interesting parts, is about the whole building of the railroad through the Sierras and what it entailed and how crazy it was. And just, these dudes were going for it. And again, is what you really understand is how all the Chinese end up on the West Coast is it's not some random thing, as they were actively importing tens of thousands of Chinese to work on the railroad because they were a superior workforce and super like they were like basically sober versus the immigrant workforce from you have to understand too that the other workforce was immigrant too from the East, which was the post-Civil War, all of those dudes, which had a little bit of a drinking problem, to say the least. And so you get into this dynamic where and understand at the same time, the telegraph is linking the country. The telegraph is going with the railroad. So when the two train lines meet at Promontory Point in Utah, the telegraph links too, which is the first form of like communication that links the whole nation together. And what I think why this is an important read, and why I do think that us as a society need to dig into the period from like 1850 to 1880 pretty heavily, because that is possibly the greatest change in the course of human history is occurring at that time. It makes what's happening now look mellow, dude. You have to understand, like, oh, we live in the time of computers and AI and all that stuff. They went from like riding around on horses and wagons to going 60 miles an hour per hour on a train across the country, dude. And telegraph at the same time. So I highly recommend this book for people that are into history. This is a heavily kind of just glossed over thing that happens in America. I think if we truly understood the impact the Transcontinental Railroad's construction and completion had in the mentality of our country, there would be a lot of super rad movies made about it. Like I was reading this and I'm like, I can't believe there hasn't been like one of those super bitchin', movies made about it, You know what I'm talking about. So, but there's a very, very, very interesting book. It's got plenty of maps, plenty of pictures. It's a little bit of a workout to get through it, but the reward is there. So I highly recommend Stephen Ambrose's Nothing Like It in the World about the Transcontinental Railroad. And when was it published? I think this isn't like a new book, because there's a new sort of history that's being written now, which I call it. So this was published in 2000. Yeah, this isn't like Candace Millard and all that stuff, which is written way more in an exciting manner. I don't know how else to, but like reading Hampton Sides, Blood and Thunder, compared to reading this is night and day. Just the tempo and the excitement of the narrative and the whole thing. But this is the bibliography's strong in this book. That's why it's a little bit dry. It's pretty well backed up. And like I said, it gets into some of the minutia of financing and politics. But I mean, you don't get the Transcontinental Railroad without it. So yeah, from 1863 to 1869, this chunk of American history, I think, is hugely important to dig in more. So and this is a pretty solid volume about it. So go get yourself a copy of this book and become a member. If you like the book reviews, you can always send me a book, dude, and I'll try to read it. I do my very best, but this kind of got me excited about reading again. The ultimate form of entertainment is reading a book, by the way. Nothing like it. And so go get yourself some Stephen Ambrose, Nothing Like It in the World. This is on a list. There's a bunch of other books I've read I highly recommend. And feed your head, read a book. Links down below. Join, become a member, PayPal, all that kind of stuff. And most importantly, use the name tags and pick up a book. It's The Illusion signing off.